We're going to learn how to create a database, and we will be using the language MySQL because you can get it for free and it's widely used. So we're going to be making a relational database, and what this means is that we're going to be creating different tables which contain data, and they will reference other tables, and that is how you define a relationship between two different entities. There are different kinds of databases. There's also file-based databases, but we will be using relational database, and we'll be using MySQL. So the MySQL syntax is pretty much the same as any other SQL syntax. So there are different versions of SQL, but they're all pretty much the same. So this should apply to any other relational database that you want to work with. So we're going to start by creating our database, and you should have downloaded MySQL and also MySQL Workbench. You can get these for free using the community version, and you shouldn't have to make an account. So if you skip to the bottom of the page when you download it and just say that you want to download it. And it will ask you to create a username and password, and then you will be able to link to that database in MySQL Workbench. So this is running locally on our machine, and it's running at localhost 3306. So let's get started with creating our database. So we can do that by writing create database and then give it a name. So I'm just going to call mine LearnSQL. Great, and the way that you execute these commands in MySQL Workbench, if you see this little lightning bolt, so this one is to run every single command that you write here, and this is to run just a single line. So if I hit that, then now our database has been created, and you can see that little command appear here. So any commands you see here, you'll be able to tell what happened. So you might end up getting a little green check that means it was executed successfully, or you might get some kind of X, which means you have some sort of error. Great, so inside of a database we have different tables, and that's where we store our data. And inside of tables we have different columns, and these are the different attributes of our data. So in this tutorial I'm going to be making a table which holds different fictional characters, and this might be used if you wanted to make a game maybe. So the way that we create a table, first we have to tell them which database we're going to use. So we can say use and then the name. And we run that. So now it's going to be using that database. So you might have other databases here. So I can see here is my LearnSQL database that I created. You might have other databases down the line, so this just tells it which one to use. And then we can put a table inside of that by saying create, and then the name of our table. Now we're going to need to also specify the columns that we want to use. So we're going to add some parentheses, and we're going to list the columns. So my character, I'm going to give it an ID so that every character can be unique, because if I'm just identifying them by their name, then they might have different names. And then I can add more columns separated by commas. So I do want to have a name for my characters, and this should probably be just letters. You might know it as a string, but we're going to call it varchar. So we also have to specify a length, and I'm just going to say 50, but you can say anything. Just know that if you try to insert a name that is more than the amount of characters that you specified, you're going to get an error. So it's always better to overestimate. So my character also might have a level, and I'm going to say this is an integer. And also they might have some sort of species. And I'm going to make this another varchar. Great. So we can run that. And it was created. So now if maybe we forget what our characters looks like, we can come over here and look at this drop down and it will show us. Or we can also use the command describe. Oh, I forgot a semicolon. There we go. So when we say describe, then we're going to see the different types of columns that we have. We're going to see what their data type is, and we're also going to see this null column. So that's whether or not you're going to allow a null value, which basically means can this column not contain any data. So maybe this person doesn't have a species that is known, so you might just have a null value for that. Great. So now we want to actually add some data. We don't just want to have a bunch of empty tables. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to say insert into, and then the name of our table, and then we're going to say values, and we're going to list the values. So you have to list them in order. Otherwise, you could also give the types out of order. So I could say name, ID, etc., and then give the values. But if you know the order of the columns, then you don't have to say what their names are. So I need to have my ID, and oh, one thing that's very important, which I forgot. So we want to have this ID be the unique identifier for our table, which when another table refers to it, it knows that that's the main column that you should go by. So we know that level probably values are going to repeat. We know that species probably values are going to repeat. You might have the same name as somebody else, but we want to specify a primary key, and we're going to have that be our ID. So that's going to say if another table wants to get a character and it wants some way of uniquely identifying them, the primary key is going to be this ID. And that could really be anything. I could have made this name, but sometimes it's a good idea just to give it an ID or something else that you know is never going to be repeated. Great, so we got to make sure that we run that. And we got an error because the table already exists. So if we want to get rid of a table, we can say drop table. So that gets rid of the table, Luckily there was no data in there, so it doesn't matter. And then we create it again, now making sure that we have that primary key. Great. So now we can put some data into our table. So characters, I'm going to say this is Hermione. And she's going to be level 10. And she's a witch. And I can just make a couple of these. So I'm just adding like a couple different characters. Let's say 5. 5 is probably good. Just so we have some data to play around with. So we'll make this 2, and we'll say this is Frodo, and he's level 6, and he's a hobbit. And number 3, these don't have to be in order. We could make this really anything. We could make this like 9, as long as it's unique. This is going to be Pinkie Pie. Level 2. And the species is pony. And maybe Pikachu. Level 30. Species is Pikachu. And Spunky is level 99999. And he's a dog. Okay, so let's run all of these. And I'm just gonna hit this run all. Great, so it seems like these are all in there. And we can come over here and we can look at our tables. And we can see now oh, it doesn't actually show us the values. So you don't get a shortcut for seeing your values. You're gonna have to grab them using some queries. So we write queries when we want to get some data out of our table. And there's a lot of different ways that we can get data out of a table. It doesn't all just have to be grab all of the data at once, which is what makes it really powerful for doing different sorts of analysis, because you can grab whatever values you want. So we can start by saying select, and maybe we want to grab all of the names. So select name from characters, or whatever the name of your table is. And if we run that, now we see down here, we are getting all of the names of our characters. Very cool. So what if we do want to grab everything? We can say select star from characters. So now this gives us every single column in our table and the values. And we can do things that are a little bit more complicated than this. We can grab maybe just a couple of the columns, and we can do that by comma separating them. So maybe I want the name and also the level. But maybe this character unlocks some sort of certain ability once they reach a certain level. So we want to be able to filter out levels that are too small. So we could say where level is greater than 15. So now we see we only have gotten those values that have a level greater than 15. And we can do a couple of different kind of built-in commands that SQL has to get maybe the average. So I could get the average level of all of my characters. So we can see that the average level is around 20,000. We could also see how many characters we have. So maybe we have a whole lot of characters, or maybe we want to just count those with a certain characteristic. So we can say count. And then we want to know everything about them. So count from characters. And we see we have 5. Well, we already knew that, but we could have put that up here. And now we see we have 2. And this becomes really useful when, you have a whole bunch of data and probably more than just 5 things. So you can also do things like min and max. There's a couple different of these built-in functions right here. So now I'm going to create a second table so that we can explore these relationships between tables. So maybe I have a team of characters and I want to be able to describe the relationship between a character and a team. So we can create a new table. Remember, we have to then have our columns. So I'm also going to give it an ID. And when we say big int, that's something like a long, something that is like a very large integer. So maybe it also probably has a name. And maybe we want to know the date that it was established. So we also have a data type called date. And probably that team has a team leader. And we're going to want to grab them by their ID. And if we remember, up here, this also had a data type of big int. Great, so now we need to, once again, say what our primary key is, and that's ID. And then also, we want to tell this table that the leader ID is referencing the table characters. So the way that we do that is we say foreign key, and we tell it which key that is, which is leader ID. And then we also tell it which table it belongs to, references, and then we give the table, and then we give it the value that it is referencing. So remember that this ID is not talking about this ID, it's talking about the ID in characters up here. So that's why we use that primary key value. Great, so if we execute that, now we have a second table. So we can add some data into there. hopefully you remember how to insert values into a table. So maybe this team is called Awesome Squad. And they were created 2020, January 1st. And we're going to say that their leader ID is 3. Great. Oh, semicolon. So you need to have that semicolon to tell it when a statement ends. Okay, great. So we have that. That's one team. So we're going to just make a couple more teams just so we can do something more interesting. So maybe this is 2. This is the Watchman. And they were made and we're going to say their leader ID is 9. And then we'll make a third one. And they were made 18th, and their leader is 4. Great. So if we run all 3 of these, oh, we already did the Awesome Squad, and you can see here that it's throwing an error because we have this duplicate primary key. So since we already tried to insert Awesome Squad with primary key of 1, we're getting an error because we can't have 2 of the same primary keys. Very good. Great. So now we have all 3 of those in there. And now we're going to do some select statements which use data from both of our tables at once. So we can use this by taking advantage of that relationship that we established with this foreign key. So maybe I want to know the names and the levels of the characters, but I also want to know their team name and when their team was established. So I can say select, I'm going to say c.name, give it a comma, c.level, and I'm going to say t.name, and I'm going to say t.established, and we want to say from characters, and then I'm going to call that table C. So it knows here c.name, so we're talking here, this letter C, we're talking about characters and we're calling it C. So that helps to distinguish between, here we have a column called name, and here we have a column called name. So which one do we really want? Okay, so then we're going to do what is called a join. So we're going to join our 2 tables together. So we're going to use a type of join called inner join. And we can say inner join team, so that's the name of the table that we want to join with, T, and then we want to say what column we're using to join the 2 together. So we're going to say on c.id equals t.leader ID. So now it knows to grab all of this data and we're going to put things together based on the character ID matching the leader ID in the team table. So when we run that, oh, whoops, this is the run everything. We want this one. So now we can see that we have these columns that we asked for, and they're all the data put together into this nice output. So there are 4 kinds of joins in SQL. We have inner joins, we have left joins, we have right joins, and we have outer joins. And the difference between those is if we pull up a little paint program, so if I have one table and I'm joining it with another table, if I do an inner join, then I'm grabbing everything here. So we did an inner join, and we got only those things that existed both in characters and in teams. Now we're going to do a left join. So now we can see that we got all 5 of our characters. However, these characters aren't team leaders. So for their team values, we get null because those values don't exist. So if we do a left join and this is our character table and this is our team table, remember we're doing a join on team, so this is our left side, this is our right side, which means we get everything that is in characters, but we're also including values from team where it's overlapping with characters. Great. So now if we do a right join, so now we see oh, that doesn't really help. We need a team that doesn't have a team leader. So if I say null, so this one does not have a lead for its team. So if I run that and then I run my right join again, so now you can see that we're getting all of the values, not all of our characters, but we are getting all of our teams. And you can see these teams have the same name because, you know, I didn't change them when I did that insert. So this is different from an inner join. If we do an inner join, then we're not going to get that team that doesn't have a team lead. So if this is a left join, then this is a right join. So we get everything from team, and we also get everything from character where it overlaps with team. So we also can do a outer join. So we had an inner join, which was this, and now we can do an outer join, which says grab everything from all tables. Everything that we specify here. So it's not the same as doing a star, but everything that we specify here we're going to do with an outer join. So unfortunately for us, The outer join does not exist in MySQL, but it does exist in other versions of SQL. But that's okay, because we're not going to be limited by that. We really want to do that outer join, and the way that we can do that outer join is by taking a left join and combining it with a right join. So we can combine two different queries by saying union. So now I have this long statement, and it has one query here, and it has another query here. We're going to make this right. So right and left should make this outer join that we desire. So if you're using a different SQL version, you could say full outer join, and that would make it. But here we see that command does not exist in MySQL. So if we run this, we should get the same result as if we did have that outer join command. So now we see that, oh, I forgot to say left here, left. So we have a left, we have a right, we mash them together. So now we get all of the characters regardless of if they're team leads, and we get all of the teams regardless of if they have a leader. And there's still a lot of cool things that you can do with SQL. So although this is a good start for you, and you should be able to do a lot of the things that you would want to do with a database, there's lots of resources for you to practice with. So if you go to my website and learn and SQL, so hopefully this is where you downloaded from. And then also we have some links to places where you can practice and some really cool reference sites where you can see all sorts of other commands. You can combine things with and or not. So there's plenty of more for you to explore and for you to get more practice. Thanks for watching.